In this nugget, we're going to take a look at the steps of implementing a sponsor portal on an ISE server. Let's begin. I'd like you to imagine that you and I want a lobby ambassador or receptionist to be able to set up accounts, and we're going to create a sponsor portal so that lobby ambassador can create those accounts. Part of that process is to enable SMTP services on ISE so that it can send outbound SMTP messages, either sending emails to individuals to let them know about their new accounts, or perhaps using an email gateway as a method of sending text messages to the guest user, letting them know about their credentials. Then we'll configure the web portal configuration specifics that allow our lobby ambassador to go ahead and log in, to create the accounts and manage those accounts that they've created. And as a confirmation, we're also going to create a guest account once we're logged in as a lobby ambassador. Now, one of the cool things is that ISE comes with a pre-configured standard guest identity group. And to see that, we'd go to Administration, and from the Identity Management section, we can select Groups. And here we have our default identity groups that come with ISE. And here's the group called Guest. And if we wanted to create additional groups, we could click on Add right here and create additional groups. In order for our ISE server to send outbound email messages, it needs to know about an SMTP server that it can use. To configure that, we're going to go under Administration, and in the System section, we're going to select Settings. And then in the Settings area over here on the left, we have the option for SMTP server. And here we would input an SMTP server address that this ISE server can use for outbound email messages. Now, the lobby ambassador, when they log on to ISE, for the purpose of creating guest accounts, they are going to connect to a specific port on the ISE server. And to see what that is by default, we'd go to Administration, and under the section of Web Portal Management, we'll select Settings. And if we expand the General section under Settings, here we have the option for ports. And you'll notice that we have port 8443 as the default port for many things, including the sponsor portal settings. So when the receptionist logs on to ISE, they're going to want to include port 8443, or we can give them a shortcut on their desktop to connect to the sponsor portal. If we expand this section for sponsor and select language template, we have language templates for many different languages. So for example, in English, we can select English, and then we could customize the details regarding the sponsor portal. So if we were going to send email notification to a guest to let them know about their username and password, we could customize the contents of that email message by simply making the changes here. If we were going to send a text message, we could go ahead and select the Configure SMS Text Message Notification. Here we would put in our SMS gateway that we're using. And we could also modify the contents of what's going to be included in that text message. If we expand the Guest subsection of Settings and select Details Policy, we can specify exactly which fields are required to be put in order to create guest user accounts. So if we needed the first name and last name, we can specify those as mandatory, which means the lobby ambassador, the receptionist, would collect that information as they created a new guest account. And if we make changes here, of course, we'd want to click on Save to make those changes permanent. Now, one of the things that we want to be aware of is that we don't want just anybody to log in as a sponsor and start creating guest accounts. We need to give them authority to do that. And to set that up, we're going to go to Administration, and under Web Portal Management, we're going to select Sponsor Group Policy. So in a lab environment, I simply modify the very first rule in this policy that says Manage All Accounts, and I said if the identity group is anything, it doesn't even matter, just for practice, and if the user is a member of this Active Directory group called AD-group-ISE, in that case, I want that user to be able to go ahead and sponsor all accounts, meaning this is a pretty unlimited user regarding the creation and management of guest user accounts. And in the lab environment, once you get it set up and working, you can then go ahead and start setting up the restrictions and pare it back. One other detail we'd want to check under Administration, Web Portal Management, and under Settings, if we expand Sponsor, we want to make sure that we have the ability for our sponsor to log in. In this example, I'm using an identity source sequence that's leveraging Active Directory as well as the local configuration on the ISE server. So this way, our lobby ambassador can authenticate with a user account that's in Active Directory. I also modified this identity source sequence and I added guest to the list of identity sources that'll be checked when this sequence is being used. And to see the contents of an identity store sequence, we'd simply go up to Administration, under Identity Management. We'd select Identity Source Sequences. And that one right there is just a lot of fun because right here it says Identity Source Sequences, and in this text it says Identity Store Sequence. So if we just squint at the word store and source, they're effectively talking about the same thing. Where are we looking for to obtain the identity information when we're doing authentication? So by selecting Identity Source Sequences and then clicking on Use AD then Local, we simply use this option right here to control which identity sources will be used whenever this identity source sequence is called upon. So in this case, it's going after an Active Directory and then internal users and then guest users in that order. So we can now use this identity source sequence for authenticating administrators, sponsors, as well as guests. Now that this is set up, our lobby ambassador can log on to the sponsor portal through a browser. So the URL for this is the ISE server and then :8443 because that is the default port for the sponsor portal. And I'm going to log in as IT-Bob. That's an Active Directory user. That's a member of the AD users group in Active Directory, which has the authorization to access and work with the sponsor portal. We'll put in the password for IT-Bob and click on Sign On. So we're logged on as IT-Bob. Here's a list of guest user accounts that IT-Bob can manage. And to create a new account, the sponsor would simply click on the icon for Create Account. And because we had specified in our template that the first and last name are both required, Bob would enter that information. If we had SMTP set up correctly, we could go ahead and have Bob check that box, and it would send an email notification to Jane Doe based on the email address that was in this field so that she could get the information that way. And if we scroll down the list a little bit, we have the role. The two options are guest or activated guest. Activated guest is a guest account that has a .1x supplicant running that can authenticate via .1x. And the role of guest is going through web authentication for the authentication of that user. And I'll go ahead and click on Submit. So there's the user account that's been given to this user, and there's the user's password. If we scroll down a little bit, we also have the option right here of printing that information. The lobby ambassador could then click on the print button and hand this piece of paper to Jane Doe. So Jane Doe would now have her credentials to go ahead and log in for guest access to the network. Another really cool feature is that the lobby ambassador, right here from the sponsor portal, has the ability to manage these guest accounts. If they want to suspend or delete or change the account duration, they can do that. Or if they want to reinstate an account, they can do all of that right here from the sponsor portal without requiring an administrator to set up and manage these accounts. In this nugget, we've taken a look at the steps to set up and implement the sponsor portal on an ISE server. I have had a great time in this nugget. I'm so glad you joined me for it. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.